Life is great, wear a great watch. What's going on, everybody? This is John from WatchGauge.com, and this is my good friend Gary
from IW Magazine.
So there's an introduction to you guys for Gary. For those of you who do not know, Gary and I met in around 99 or 2000.
Chrono Swiss.
Yeah, I was working with Chrono Swiss. Gary was the founder of IW Magazine.
Founder, editorial director, chief cook and bottle washer.
And still doing it a few years later.
33 years later, still up and running. So welcome to our new segment, a podcast style catch up on the week in watches. News, new watches, auction results, anything of interest in the watch world. Covering a wide spectrum from affordable to mid-market to ultra-luxurious. And we have a very cool ultra-luxurious piece to show today. So I just got this press release from Anna Martin's PR, wonderful lady who represents a lot of excellent watch companies, and Cross Studios is one of them. And this is an interesting story. It's not a very old brand. It was only launched in 2020. And the founder, Tedeschi was the name of the founder, made his central tourbillon, a raised central tourbillon movement as, I believe it was his college training watch, which is not unusual. A lot of watchmakers, they go through watchmaking school, F.B. Journe, Frank Muller, they make their own movement and then carry it into the commercial market. So what we have here today is a House of Dragon, dragon-inspired Targaryen metal tourbillon that we're going to show you now.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's interesting because, you know, for the years and years I was in the high-end side of the watches, I've kind of gotten away from that for a few years, and honestly not extremely familiar with Cross Studio. However, I did recognize a couple of their other projects from news releases and stuff, and the stuff they're doing, guys, is just absolutely bananas.
It is, and that's the interesting thing. I've had to cover the full spectrum. You know, with IW, we cover the luxury. You're talking about hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in a single watch. But launching About Time and that platform gave me a real down-to-earth insight for value arguments, styles, and such, even under $1,000.
Right.
So we covered the broad spectrum. In this case, we're going to be going up to the high end. This really is an amazing timepiece. If you like something bold and different, the keys and the crowns, you know, they're all worth their money, those watches. But if you've got your fill of those, look at what we have here. This is not for the light,
not the faint of heart. Right.
This is a watch that, if you can see the rear of it, you can see. Oh, they go back to. Oh. So the rear, you'll see the dragons engraved on the back, representing the House of Targaryen and the Game of Thrones inspiration. But the really cool factor here is when you look at the profile. If you can show us the dome of the movement, the dome with the sapphire crystal showing off that movement. Can you imagine that standing up on a stock like that, that tourbillon escapement is not only ticking as a normal escapement, but it's also rotating.
Right.
And
so it's a multi-axis tourbillon.
This is not a multi-axis tourbillon, but the challenge here is that the power source has to come up through the stocks. So, you know, it always amazed me. Thomas Pressure did something similar, where the tourbillon sat like a lollipop on top.
Right.
And that was a multi, and it's how does it work?
Right.
It also adds a depth of, you know, it's like an iPod. Remember the feel that the HEMAPod had?
Yeah.
It really lets you in and creates a third dimension instead of a flat look. And this is his latest iteration, and if you want to pick up some of the details, you can see talk about the
one of the things for me though is I can imagine if that's on my wrist or if I'm holding that and getting a loop, you can get that side view, you know, right up here of the whole escapement, just taking away from a whole different angle that you wouldn't normally get.
No, I mean, there are some watches that are few among others that have a window on the side to show a little bit of that. But no, when you put it on a platform like this, and again, pinging around the industry, look at MB&X, Max, Bluser, MB&F. Yeah. Max does something similar with his Legacy series. Where it's almost like art in motion. The engineering becomes the art of the movement, becomes the aesthetic. Where you're showing right here, look at the Damascus.
Well, that's what I was going to mention that because I know you know a lot about Damascus steel, a lot about knives and things like that. So the Damascus steel, tell us about the display here.
Well, so that inner, it's not really a rehaut, but that inner chapter ring is in a Damascus, which to my eye, it didn't stipulate on the website or the press release, but it looks to me like a water droplet Damascus, which, as most people will know, is layered steel that is folded, twisted, re-flattened, and till you get these different patterns. You can have
Right.
a wave pattern, you can have this water droplet pattern, all different types. And the multiple layers of steel, when you dip them in acid, will show the different colors. There's slightly different alloys that react differently that give you this wonderful pattern.
Yeah.
So it's been used in watches before. Swedish brand has used them. There's another brand about to launch, which I'm not at liberty to talk about.
Okay.
Is using it very, for the entire case.
Yep.
But in this case, it's just an excellent little aesthetic addition into the snakeskin case that you just went by.
Yeah, that's titanium, grade 5 titanium. Funky pattern.
Well,
Scales.
it's the dragon scale pattern,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's you see a lot of these collaborations with Aline Silverstein applying his color and shapes and geometries to Louis Erard or Cazès clocks or anything.
Right.
That takes in this case the inspiration came from Game of Thrones, and I think it's a very cool watch. I think it's a limited edition. It's not for the faint of heart. For price wise, I think it's $109,000. Presented in the dragon egg, which I guess you have to throw it in the fire to hatch it.
See, I don't know anything about Game of Thrones. Dynamite. So we'll move on to the next piece of news. What else happened in the watch industry?
So next up in the week in watches, we have a Chrono Swiss that we featured in our weekly newsletter and on our website. Chrono Swiss was acquired a few years ago by Oliver Epstein.
Yeah.
And what you see here is a new generation of Chrono Swiss.
A new iteration, a new design.
So most of the designs for the modern Chrono Swiss you see are regulator designs, which for the uninitiated it means the hour hand and the minute hand are separated for ease of reference. In this case it's also a retrograde second, so there's I think a 120 degree arc or so showing the 30-second arc, then the hand will snap back. This particular watch is I call it a noir version, if you will. It's blacked out. It's got a blacked out actual guilloche dial done on a Rose engine.
Right.
I've been told, I didn't see the dials being made, but I will take them at their word.
Yeah, sure.
Give me a loop in the watch in my hand and I can confirm it, but I'll take them at their word. And it's a beautiful all black watch with just those hints, those pillars of superluminova. The case is steel. It's a full-size case. I think it's 44 millimeter. Refresh that. I know it's 44 millimeter with the onion crown. And a good solid execution. This watch can appear in so many different looks, the same layout. And that's what Chrono Swiss today has done, which is very different from when it was founded.
Right.
And I want to touch on that because I know you and I both have a history with Chrono Swiss, and we're
Deep history, yeah.
And I'm sad to say, if you already haven't heard, and I'm sure most people have, the founder of Chrono Swiss, Gerd Rudiger Lang, passed away just over a week ago, and he was one of the founding fathers of the return of the mechanical watch.
Right.
And I'd met him on numerous occasions at the Basel Fair. He was kind enough to take me to dinner. I knew his distributor, Stephen Butler, bless his soul as well. He passed away a while back. And I think you have a history with Chrono Swiss too.
Yeah, so obviously I've said on the channel many times that my first job in the watch industry was working for Stephen Butler, and I guess because Gerd was above him, I also worked for Gerd. Fascinating individual. The first time I fell in love with watches is when Stephen handed me a Chrono Swiss lunar chronograph, and he told me to flip it over, and I saw the movement. It's the first time I'd ever seen an automatic movement, and in person, or even, I think, probably ever. And I became fascinated. Just a funny, quick history of Gerd, from what I understood and from what he expressed to me way back in the day, was, during the quartz crisis, people were throwing away thousands of movements. The Swiss companies were going out of business, and those movements were either warehoused somewhere or literally being thrown away. And he went and either got them for free because nobody wanted them, or he paid very little for them and he started housing them.
I've heard stories they bought them by weight.
I don't
They
doubt
fill
that.
a box up, that's 5 pounds worth of movements that today would be not priceless, but
Almost, right? So a lot of the early Chrono Swisses used vintage movements from the 60s. Mm-hmm. But from what I gather, Gerd, as you mentioned, Gerd is one of the guys, Mr. Lang was one of the guys who is credited for automatic wristwatches being mainstream today, right? And I believe he was the first one to put a sapphire crystal case back on a watch so you could see the movement. If he wasn't the first, he was the first one to do it serially across his collection of watches he built.
And it's interesting because sapphire came into the game after the mechanical watch had lost its luster.
Right.
So when the quartz watch came in to the favor, who wanted to see an electronic circuit board?
Correct.
So when the mechanical watch regained its prominence, it was smart to put that on to show off the artistry. And not only did he put it on the back, but a lot of his watches, the Delphis, the Opus, had skeletonized fronts. Even some of the chronographs.
Yeah. And you can see with the new regulator that they're showing us here. You know, if you take a look, and I'll superimpose one on in post edit here, the original regulator. You know, you could see where the lineage of this watch is. You know, where it came from. The layout is very similar to the original layout, albeit the retrograde secondhand. But it's, you know, I like what Chrono Swiss does these days because they really pay homage to Gerd's original designs and original watches.
Yeah, but they've updated with their own feel, so they've graduated to the next level, and this is what Chrono Swiss is today. It was beautiful back then, and it's beautiful today.
Yeah, and you know, just to get a close up of this wrist shot, it's it's a fantastic looking watch, and for me personally, it brings me back to a younger John. You know, and truly being brand new in the industry and just falling in love with everything I was learning.
That's when we first met, I believe.
First met. I believe it was just about 2000, and you were one of the first people I met in the industry. So this goes back a ways, guys. So all right, so let's head on to the next what's new in watches this week. The next one, Gary, I like a lot because I like color. I like things that are different, and it's the new colors in the Nomos Club.
The cream coral and the electric green. I got this press release not long ago, and I do like Nomos. They throw a great party when the Basel Fair used to go on, first of all.
The Basel Fair.
Oh, long time gone. But they're very famous. They're one of the recovering German watch industry brands. We've got Lange & Sunglass, Schutte, Tutima, Nomos, Vempe, and Nomos is known for their own being rare among watchmakers for having their own in-house escapement.
Okay.
And this movement in particular is a manual wind in this is the Club Campus series.
Right.
36 millimeters, so it's going to be on the smaller side for bigger wrists, but it's also comfortable to wear and very slim. You'll forget it's on your wrist. It's not a big dive watch.
Which I happen to like. I mean, most of the watches I own are dive watches, but I love when I'm wearing a watch and I forget it's on my wrist, weight-wise and feel-wise. I really like that.
I do too. But there's other times I want the shock value of the Game of Thrones tourbillon.
Right.
Or, something robust like a Wilbur watch. But there's other times like when it disappears on my wrist, it's nice. You just roll it over. And there's a little bit of color here. And like you, I like a splash of color. I don't know if I've been looking at watches for so long. I like something that's a little different.
I think that's kind of everybody goes through a journey in watches, right? Like you're gravitated towards certain things and you look at other things and say, I would never like that. And then 3 or 4 or 5 years later, you're gravitated towards something else. And for years and years and years, all I ever wore were dive watches that were somehow blue. Dark blue, light blue, medium blue, whatever it may be, navy, royal, whatever. But I had 11 blue dive watches at one point. For some reason, and I think I credit Zodiac with this, being such a big fan of Zodiac and the way they use colors. Lately, I find myself drawn to more colorful watches.
Yeah, I agree, and I have for a while. And the thing is, like I said, I've got eclectic taste.
Yeah.
I like a wide variety depending on the circumstance, and there's a lot of ways that this watch would appeal even at 36 millimeters to me, but it's also a unisex watch, and that's what Nomos does go for. They're going for a unisex, which makes it popular in the Far East as well. Smaller wrists, a little bit of color, but still simple. What you have here is a manual wind watch, and let me slip in a little hint about watchmaking here on manual wind watches. People love them because you can feel the wind. It keeps you involved with your watch. You have to wind it every day or two at the minimum. But the downside is that interacting with that crown so frequently, according to my master watchmaker and my other company, this can wear out much more quickly than the automatic version of the same thing because you're working those gaskets and O-rings every 2 days at a minimum if you're wearing it constantly. That said, it's well worth it. The movements can be much thinner. This is only a 2.6 millimeter thin movement.
So
can you imagine 100 and something parts.
Right.
Keeping 99.99 something % accuracy, without a battery, without electronics, in 2.6 millimeter space.
Plates, jewels, springs, gears, screws.
And it's actually a smaller than usual movement. Everyone knows ETA 2892s, Valjoux 7750s. This is only a 10.5 line movement, so it's only a 23 millimeter diameter.
Right.
Full credit to the people at Nomos. Look at the decoration. You've got the spiral on the mainspring barrel cap. You've got the Geneva waves across the 3/4 plate. Typical 3/4 plate is a German design.
Yeah.
It's robust. My watchmaker loves them because they are much more robust. You don't see as much of the inner working, but he believes it's a more solid total package. And I think these were, what was the price that we were looking at? They were $1,500, I think.
Yeah, in that range.
For a watch of this caliber, that's a very fair price.
I completely agree with you, 110%.
It's not going to appeal to the guy who wants the big bad bold,
Right.
but
Right.
has its own character.
You know, for me, a watch like this, particularly with the colors, you know, that's not going to be my first or second watch, right? I'm going to have a collection of watches. That's going to be something I throw on when I'm feeling beachy or feeling like, you know, going out to a dinner on the water.
Well, that's it. It's a very summery type feel. The match, and I can see men or women are matching it to the outfit that they're wearing.
Absolutely. I don't know that I wear outfits with those colors personally, but I am wearing orange
Coral,
sneakers. So.
the coral, I can see getting away with the coral.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, matching the color to the outfit.
I never say never, my friend. I never say never. Excellent, excellent watch. I love it.
Yeah, I'm just happy to receive it. A nice expansion of their campus.
Their club campus collection. So I thought we touched on an expensive watch earlier. Let's go way up the ladder. What was released this week that is way the heck out of my price range?
Yeah, so Jacob and Company, famous for their Astronomia and quite a few other designs, always pushes the limit, and they released this new roulette wheel watch, which actually has a loose pill, as the ball is referred to, inside the case that will travel around as the table spins, the roulette table spins, and pick a number. You can gamble on your wrist. You hit the button on the side, set it to spin, and it'll land hopefully in a different slot every time. And it's got inside it, I mean, mechanically, you're looking at the tourbillon mechanism here in the back.
Right.
You're looking at the time changing is from one of these levers, and the other is winding the watch. It's a manual wind watch.
Yep.
21/6 frequency, as most tourbillons are. They tend to run a little bit slower. You get more power reserve, less impact. But the real home run here is that roulette wheel on the dial, and the ball bearings and the way it's built, that it runs so smooth.
Right.
It really is amazing.
Which is to say, you know, this isn't to say that this is the first roulette watch out there, right? I mean, they've been done by Christophe Claret, by Azimuth.
Azimuth did one. Yeah, there were several companies, and I think Frank Muller actually did one.
They did it?
In the past as well.
I remember one of them. I'm not sure if it was the Muller or which one it was, but instead of having an actual floating ball, it was a ball on the end of a hand.
Yes,
and that spun around quickly,
the table would spin in wherever it stopped.
Correct.
But it also had a little bit of as it slowed down, like an effect where it jumped slowly. And that, I forget which one that was, but we've seen gambling integrated into watches in a few different. Christophe Claret.
Christophe Claret's poker watch.
Poker watch, exactly.
That watch was fantastic.
A different hand of poker. I mean, it gets a little bit crazy, and it's a talking piece.
Listen, this is all outrageous, right? When you're talking, what was the price point?
$208 or $280,000.
Right. So I mean, at this point, I have
$280,000, a limited edition of 101 pieces. It is solid gold, and it's a bigger watch. You can imagine to fit this mechanism in here. The movement alone has almost 250 pieces for their tourbillon, and it's so cool that it's a tourbillon. They still made it a tourbillon, even though you can't see it from the front.
Right.
You know, very few brands do that. Patek does that.
Right.
They make a tourbillon. You don't have to see it and show it off.
Right. Does H. Moser makes one?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I have a term for this kind of money. I'm not going to say what it is here on this channel, but you know, for a guy who loves my watches at $1,000 and sometimes $500 and sometimes $50,000, this is a whole next level. But you know, for me personally, I've had a love-hate relationship with Jacob & Co. mainly because my first exposure was that big, huge diamond gaudy piece at 60 millimeters. However, and the Astronomia, is that the name of it?
The Astronomia.
The Astronomia has to be one of the most spectacular watchmaking things I've ever seen, but it's like a table clock on your wrist. So to me, that's the kind of thing where I would have a glass table. If I had stupid money, I'd have a glass table, and that thing would sit there, and I would just watch it. Just look at it.
It is. It's a piece of art. There's no question. I don't know if that's... I'm a proponent. If you buy an exotic car, drive it.
Yeah.
If you buy a high-end watch, wear it. But in that case, I might make the exception because I'd sit at my desk longer and do more work because it's just...
I don't know that I'd get work done, but I would just stare at it. But that being said, this is really, you know, a great new take on a gambling watch or a casino type watch.
Well, and I think this is probably the first example of the watch post-takeover. Ben, the son, is now taking the reins at Jacob & Company from Dad. And it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the brand evolves under his direction.
I think, listen, they've got some of the craziest horological inventions or creations on the planet, along with Max Busser and other guys like that, and it's always exciting to see what they do.
And if you take a loop to this, you can take a 10-power loop. When you look at one of these watches, the level of perfection under magnification is just hard to imagine. So it's an expensive timepiece, more than $250,000, but the finesse and the savoir-faire, to use the French term that's oft overused, it's there. This watch is, Jacob & Company has grown into that next generation. I mean, it's not just the next generation of people running it, but it's also, I mean, when they started with their Harlequin dialed watches, those were not all that exotic or, you know, expensive. Multiple quartz movements inside, and to go from there to here, it's a new world.
It's been a nice story to see evolve over the years.
Yeah, it has.
Excellent. Dynamite. Well, Gary, it's good to see you as always. Thanks for taking the time and dropping some knowledge that we usually don't drop on this channel, but we're going to do it more often going forward, correct?
We are, and it's a great combination with your 20-plus years of experience on all different aspects of the industry. Welcome on board with IW as well. I appreciate your knowledge, and we encourage anyone who's watched this to subscribe to our newsletter as well as to our digital subscription, because like a lot of the brands we talk about, IW has also evolved from the 1990 edition to the new edition, which we've now added About Time to as well. Thank you. Now,
About Time is the more affordable side of the magazine, correct?
High-end luxury, affordable stuff that any of you guys can.
So it's going to translate, it's going to resonate with anybody in the watch industry. I'm going to drop the links for both all of the social medias for IW Magazine as well as WatchGauge. If you're not already following, subscribing, liking, and sharing, please do all that stuff, and we'll get back to you guys real soon. And if you do subscribe to our digital edition, not only will you get the current and future editions, plus the issues that we've already archived over the last few years, but I found our entire archive since the first issue came out. This is issue number 2, 1990. We're going to be scanning and digitizing these. All subscribers will have access, and it's a trip down memory lane. You want to see what Breitling was doing in 1990? You'll be able to. Thank you.